major source of power on the West Coast. At one time, it produced more electricity than all the power plants in LA. So the infrastructure there to send out that kind of electricity is what makes it attractive for the industry to come in here and why the state signs off on it in this area. You have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. It's regarding the battery fire. I'm really grateful that people with the Emergency Operation Command are here. My question has to do with the evacuation. I felt that the evacuation was lifted prematurely and didn't span a large enough area. And I was wondering what information was used to lift the evacuation, and was it ever reevaluated? And I ask about the reevaluation because on the morning of January 18th, that EPA air monitoring data was never made public, but there was records showing that that morning the PM reached 1.275 milligrams per meter cubed, which is triple the hazardous level. So what information was used for the evacuation, and was it ever reevaluated?
Kelsey and Chief knows you're very clearly well.
North County Fire and Sheriff's Office.
So, yeah, great question. Obviously, we were working in unified command with the Sheriff's Office. You know, when we initially asked the Department of Emergency Management to send out this alert for shelter in place, we talked about this earlier, that there's plume modeling that was provided to us, but to speak and add to what Kelsey Scanlon was just talking about is, you know, those plants that were given to us, they were for like one battery burning or one battery rack, or with a module within a battery rack. And so, you know, we planned for that. However, you know, in this particular case, we had to defer back to something that we've never seen before. You know, a battery fire like this, we've never seen at that scale. We've had the one at PG&E burn before. We erred on the side of caution. You know, we had monitoring in place, but we saw fog coming in, and what we said is we're gonna reach out as far as we think is logical in order to keep the public safe. This was the same case. When this thing started, when we knew that it was burning uncontrollably, and that the systems that were designed to keep this thing in check were overridden, then we spoke to Kelsey along with the Sheriff's Office and said we need to put these, the evacuation order in. You know, as far as when it was lifted, we relied on data, which was the monitoring that was being conducted. It was either an EPA contractor and the private company CTEH by HISTRA. And so that's the only thing that we have to rely on is the data that's being collected. And you know, in conjunction with the Department of Emergency Management and you know, all agencies aware essentially, but the Sheriff's Office, we came to the conclusion that it was safe to lift that evacuation order at that point.
Chief Mendoza might also add, the reentry repopulation process for any emergency, whether it be this event or wildfires or flooding, is a very much a collaborative effort between all first responder agencies that have a vested interest, responsibility, or critical infrastructure in the area. So generally speaking, we look at risk to life and property that may still persist in the area. We look at road conditions, bridge conditions, availability of utilities such as water, and the general livable conditions of the community prior to lifting evacuation orders. And we all have to come to consensus upon lifting those orders. If at any point in time an agency disagrees, we pause on the lifting of the order and have a conferral again later that day or the next day. So it is no singular agency that makes that decision, though the lawful order to evacuate is held by the Monterey County Sheriff's Office. They rarely take or make that decision alone to either enforce it or to lift it. They are a very collaborative agency with that respect. And so the lifting of an evacuation zone is constantly evaluated the second an evacuation order is actually issued. The Sheriff's Office, having worked with them for almost a decade now, is not interested in keeping people from their property longer than is absolutely necessary. And so they're constantly looking at the risk to life and safety and receiving information from subject matter experts regarding the threat to public health and safety. So having said that, as Chief Mendoza had mentioned, at that juncture, our understanding of the greatest threat to the community at that time was either conflagration, which we felt confident was still able to retain within the perimeter of the fence line, or potential hazardous materials in the form of a plume, or hazardous gases, which you've heard amply about over the last several months. During that time, none of the monitors indicated that there was a significant presence of hydrofluoric acid or gas that would have impacted residents or individuals more than was allowable by OSHA, I believe. And so that was ultimately the determining factor by all parties as to why the evacuation order should be lifted.
So the equipment that CTEH was using was insufficient because its limit of detection was 0.5 parts per million, while the MRL was 0.02 parts per million, and the OEHH 1 hour standard you guys were using was 0.293 parts per million. So why is CTEH allowed to use insufficient equipment that can only detect up to 0.5 parts per million if you're using a standard for 0.293?
CTEH was not the only agency conducting air monitoring at that juncture. It was also the US EPA and MBARD, and we received input from all three of those entities to make that informed decision.
So the EPA was using equipment that wasn't specific to HF. Can you guys talk about the difference in the limit of detection on that kind of equipment at all? I think it was like a SPF gas flex cassette.
I can't speak to US EPA